The past couple of years have been brutal for computer hardware pricing. Laptops, graphics cards, games consoles, memory, it's all skyrocketed in price and it's turning computers into a luxury. But it doesn't have to be this way. You see, with a little bit of know-how and ingenuity, it's possible to build your own fully custom PCs by recycling parts from the most unusual of sources, bringing joy back into the hobby of building PCs in a way that has the environment and your wallet thanking you profusely. Everything on this homemade all-in-one PC has been salvaged from dead hardware, from the motherboard and speakers to the wide gamut 4K screen, making it a fraction of the cost compared to buying new. Salvaged laptop motherboards in particular are key here. While you can recover these yourself from physically damaged laptops, a more reliable way to get them is by buying already refurbished units online, as they're available for very good prices. This motherboard, for example, has been pulled from a smashed up laptop, and it has all of the major components already on the board, such as an AMD AI processor, a dedicated NVIDIA RTX graphics unit, and get this, 32 gigabytes of onboard DDR5 memory. Wow. What makes this even more impressive is that the entire board cost less than a 32 gigabyte kit of desktop memory on its own. Wild. This is remarkable value and is approximately 3 times cheaper than a system built out of standard components would cost. And so you're probably wondering, just why are these things so cheap? Well, motherboards like this are such ridiculously good value because they're exclusively only useful to people who need them as a spare part for their specific model of damaged laptop. That's a very limited pool of people for each part, so naturally they've been insulated from the insane cost of hardware we've seen lately. Really, this is like a time glitch where you can buy high-power parts at yesterday's prices. There is one big problem though in the way of reusing them that's remarkably basic, and that's simply powering them on. You see, being intended for laptops, there is no power button on them. And this is because most laptops in the past few years have migrated their power buttons onto the keyboard membrane itself. This means that you need the original keyboard plugged in order to trigger a boot. But as they are seldom included with motherboards bought online, well, hard luck is what I would say. However, with a little bit of detective work, it's actually possible to get almost any laptop motherboard to boot with a very high success rate. You see, taking a close look at the keyboard connector, we can see that it's made up of several pins. And one of these pins is dedicated to the power button on the keyboard membrane. We just need to find out which one, and all we need for this is a multimeter and a pin. You see, when a laptop motherboard is provided with power, it enters a standby state. The power management circuitry now sends a low voltage, usually about 3.3 volts, to some other pins on the keyboard connector, one of which is monitored as a power button trigger. To find out which one it is, we need to connect a multimeter probe to a ground point, like a screw hole, and then use the other to check the tiny contacts on the connector one by one and mark any that show a voltage. As the contacts on my board are just so small, I found it necessary to use a small pin to achieve a finer probe tip. As you can see, there are several contacts that present a voltage, but only one of them will be our power button. Can you guess which one? While it's not always true, a pin standing alone has a good chance of being the power pin. So let's test it out by bridging it to ground, as would occur if the original power button were to be pressed. And sure enough, the board boots. As laptop fans don't always immediately start spinning like this though, a more reliable way to tell is to put your ear to it instead, as it will emit an audible chattering noise if the boot up process is initiated, and it should also start feeling warm to the touch. By the way, never boot a board without a heatsink and fan attached, as it will thermally destroy itself if it were to be booted up without it. So now that we've been able to trigger a boot, we can just plug a monitor into the HDMI port and start using it, right? Well, not so fast. While some laptop motherboards would handle this scenario just fine, many do not, so we need a little bit of a workaround. And thankfully, this video's sponsor, Opera, can actually be a help here. Opera is an advanced web browser optimized for productivity and getting things done, built to make research and development a breeze. Take our present project. Before buying a motherboard, we need to know if it's actually suitable, specifically whether the board has USB-C ports and whether any of them support DisplayPort output. And this is where Opera's split screen comes in, as it allows for quick cross-checking of information. Just drag a tab down to the center of the screen, pick a layout, up to 4 at a time. I've got the manual, spec sheet and a review all side by side, and as you can see, this board does indeed support USB-C DisplayPort output, so plugging in a display is going to be straightforward, as we'll see in a minute. No more tab hopping to compare pages. And when a project has this many moving parts, Opera's tab islands keep it all organised. I can group potential boards into one island, part specifications in another, and give each a colour, and then collapse or expand them with a single click so that the workspace never turns into chaos. And because you can spend hours doing this, the built-in music player can keep you going. It works with 7 different streaming services, so whatever you're into, control it straight from the sidebar, and even pop it out into its own floating window without ever leaving the main task. Opera even allows you to integrate Google services into its sidebar, allowing you to have quick access to your calendar, Gmail, and Translate with one click. So to optimize your workflow and browser experience, use the link in the video description or pinned comment to download Opera for free today. So, after confirming that a board's USB-C port is capable of outputting a DisplayPort signal, our workaround is to plug our display into a USB-C connector instead. As USB-C gets its display signal from much higher up the signal chain, this way will almost always work compared to using a board's HDMI output, although it is still worth checking the HDMI output first, just in case. I've tried this pin boot up method on multiple boards and I've been able to get a display out of all of them. But there are some variations and things to consider, so before you go out and buy your own board, make sure you read through the forum thread that I've linked to down below, where you can also help each other out if you get stuck. Now, of course, we do need a better way of triggering the boot than using a pin, which I'll get to in a minute, but now that we know that it's entirely possible to use laptop motherboards completely independently, and that it makes both environmental and financial sense to do so, it's time to make something awesome with them. And what we'll need next is a screen. Now, so far in the video, I've been using a fairly basic LCD panel. However, we have the opportunity here to take the recycling theme to the limit with an idea that I've wanted to present here on DIY Perks for literally years. And that's to reuse an old, smashed up iMac screen. At first glance, this one appears to be beyond unusable, but we need to look past this for a second. You see, even from a decade ago, iMac shipped with absolutely incredible high-resolution Retina displays. They are wonderfully bright, feature superb contrast and colour reproduction, and offer a resolution higher than 4K, meaning that there isn't a visible pixel in sight. Because the machines housing these displays are genuinely old now, nobody really wants them. However, the displays remain insanely good even by today's standards, making them absolutely worth salvaging. Broken panels in this condition can often be found at recycling and repair centres, often for free, so it's definitely worth calling around those local to you to see what they've got in stock. But obviously we can't use them in this condition, so we need to do something about it. If you think back to my giant iPhone video, we laminated our display for it to a sheet of acrylic using optically clear glue to bond it together. That's exactly what Apple have done here too. They've simply bonded the LCD panel to a sheet of glass, which means that if we can delaminate this glass, we'll be left with, hopefully, a pristine LCD panel. The process for this needs patience because speed is an enemy here. The panel and glass only delaminate successfully when tugged on gently, with warmth applied from a hairdryer or heat gun. It must never become too hot to touch, as this may damage the LCD panel itself. To slice under the glass properly, the only real way is to use a strong, thin wire, with the fewer breaks along the way being the better, since it's easier to keep the delamination going than to start again from a sharp glass edge. Like I said, the slower the better.
I should also mention that this is real glass, so if you do ever find yourself doing anything like this, you must wear proper hand and eye protection. As you can see, I was not wearing strong gloves initially, and I did end up with a cut, so you have been warned. Anyway, once all the glass is removed, it still looks pretty horrendous. However, this is just residual glue, and sure enough, using plenty of alcohol to wipe it away reveals a pristine LCD panel. Getting the residue off completely takes a while, but oh boy is it worth it, as it looks like it's brand new. Very nice.
So now that we've successfully extracted our screen and that it's in wonderful condition, it's time to send an image to it.
Unsurprisingly, it's not possible to merely plug in a display cable here, as the panel itself needs a special display driver to interpret the signal first. Thankfully, driver boards that are suitable for this are readily available online for about $50 and can just be plugged straight into the panel to give it various video input ports and image controls, basically converting it into a standard display. And what a display it is! The contrast, sharpness and colours are all absolutely on point, giving us a genuinely class-leading screen to build the rest of our system around. One new problem presented by removing the glass layer though is that the panel no longer has a bezel, so it can actually pull away from its backlight layer. An easy way to fix this is to add a new edge, and I'm going to go with a hardwood profile as it's just the right size to cover the perimeter of the display nicely. Being real wood, it does of course need to be oiled first, and I'm going with a pigmented oil to maintain its light appearance. There are loads of different material options other than wood as well, like aluminium or brass profiles, or even some kind of 3D printed enclosure. The sky is the limit, so it really is an opportunity to be creative and try something new. As for the back of the display, I've cut out a sheet of aluminium that matches its size to make a cover for it. As you can see, it fits within my wooden perimeter nicely, but it does fall beneath the edge of the wood rather than being flush with it, so I've decided to use a few wood offcuts to make some mounting brackets to hold this panel away from the back of the display panel. This makes a nice air gap between them too, which will be useful for hiding cables when it comes to mounting the components.
So with this wooden edging now glued to the panel, the display is complete, and it has a unique, characterful aesthetic that I'm going to lean into heavily for the rest of the build, but for now we need to start adding the rest of the components that are going to drive it.
This is where salvaging laptop motherboards really makes sense. They're small, powerful, and potentially very good value, making them perfect for repurposing into custom projects like this. The one I'm using has pretty decent specs, and thankfully the aluminium panel we just added is perfect for mounting it onto. And the best way of doing this is to carefully mark the mounting holes and drill them out. Other holes in the panel can be made at this stage too, whether it be ventilation holes to aid in airflow for the laptop's heatsink fans, or holes for cable routing purposes, which will help to keep things neat. Now, speaking of keeping things neat, I like covering aluminium with vinyl wrap as it's a lot quicker than painting it, which makes it immediately ready for the components to be mounted to. So that these components are properly spaced away from the potentially still conductive aluminium surface, it's necessary to use some short PCB pillars. These hold the board securely in place, keeping it safe from being bent, as they are quite fragile that way, and there's plenty of space for the display driver board here as well. Now, it's worth noting that both the motherboard and the display driver require different DC voltages to operate, and as my ultimate goal is to run them both cleanly from a single power supply, I need to introduce a little voltage regulator. This steps down the laptop's input voltage to a level acceptable for the display driver as well, allowing them both to be powered at the same time. Pulling power for both boards simultaneously from the same power supply will naturally introduce a higher current load for it, so I'll be swapping out the laptop's original 200 watt power brick for a much beefier 300 watt unit, which should power everything with ease. After linking our display driver and motherboard together with a simple USB-C to DisplayPort cable, routing it through the cable management holes to keep things looking neat, the system is technically ready to use. But to make it a more versatile computer, I'm going to add a few extras, like a USB hub and card reader to extend the number of ports available, some extra memory to complement the memory already on the board, an SSD for storage, as well as a Wi-Fi card. Now, regarding the Wi-Fi, as the whole casing is essentially going to be an aluminium box, I've picked up a pair of external antennas to mount in one corner. I'll likely keep them folded down so that they remain hidden from view, but if the wireless signal ever does drop, they can be extended outwards to instantly maximize reception. So, with the core of the hardware fully populated, there's one final job to tackle, which is the power button. As I've already gone through the process of discovering the power button pin for this particular motherboard, I know which one to use to trigger it to boot. But manually touching it with a metal pin every single time is obviously just not that practical. Furthermore, the connector traces are far too tiny and delicate to safely solder wires to directly, so we need an alternative solution, and I think the best way is by making our own custom ribbon cable. You see, by cutting a piece of paper to the right width, we can easily fit it into the slot where it can be locked in place by the catch, making for a great base for our ribbon cable. To add a conductive part to it, the idea is to take some copper foil tape and cut it to have a very thin strip at one end. If we mark the position of the power pin on the paper and stick this copper tape in place lined up with it, it should make contact with the pin after being inserted. However, for me, checking it with a multimeter on beeper mode doesn't show this to be the case. But that is okay, as the issue is just that the ribbon cable receptor expects the contacts to be on the underside, not the top, so it simply needs to be inverted. As my ink dot soaked through the paper a bit, it's actually visible on the other side, so lining the copper up here instead and then flipping it over does indeed fix the issue. The multimeter now reports good contact with the exact pin we want, while the ones directly adjacent to it on either side are left disconnected. Awesome. With our custom ribbon cable working beautifully, all that's left to do now is to carefully solder a thin paired wire to any of the ground planes and then its twin to the copper strip. This gives us the ability to easily boot the entire system whenever these two wires are momentarily bridged by a physical button, which we'll add in just a moment. So with that done, the entire chassis assembly can be finally bolted to the back of our custom display frame and plugged into it. We are almost there.
Now the plan here is to make a back panel to cover the components and to make it look a lot neater, but before I get on with that, I do need to make some kind of stand. And while I could just recycle and reuse an old monitor stand, it ends up making it look very office-like and kind of lame. So instead, what I want to do is make my own artistic stand out of an old floorboard.
As this old floorboard is solid oak, it should match the frame nicely, and my plan is to cut it into 3 long triangles that can form a 3-legged tripod, holding them together with a capping block. As my triangles aren't exactly perfect though, it doesn't actually stand straight, so I flipped it upside down to use a laser leveler to project onto each leg and mark them all so that they can be trimmed down to the same length. This is surprisingly effective at getting it level, and it's pretty much perfect now. It's not initially very rigid screwed to the frame, but adding an extra anchor point with a bracket helps a lot, strengthening it significantly.
As you can see, this is way more interesting of a stand, and it matches the overall picture frame aesthetic, which I think looks really cool for a computer. Now, we're almost ready to use it. However, we haven't actually added some speakers yet, and we've got this massive area on the back that we can take advantage of.
You see, with speakers, the bigger, the better. And this space is large enough for a slimline subwoofer from an old broken TV, which conveniently came with a pair of mid-tone and treble units too.
Now, TV speakers don't have a reputation for sounding particularly good, but this is actually more down to how they are orientated within the TV than the drivers themselves. So for example, they're often facing downwards or backwards to bounce the sound off the surfaces to hopefully then reach your ears, and this never sounds good no matter how good the drivers are.
So what I want to do is mount them facing the user directly, which should have a huge boost to their audio quality. To mount them to the legs like this, I've made a little enclosure for them. I've gone with 3D printing here for a bit of material and colour contrast, with some textured fabric to hide the drivers themselves from view. This forward-facing speaker bar is also the perfect location for us to finally mount our main power button. I'm using a simple tactile push-button switch that we can wire into the custom ribbon cable extension we made earlier. Now, having this 3D printed meant that I could design the angles just right for it to fit within the wooden legs perfectly, resulting in the speakers being slightly angled upwards towards the user. From an electronics standpoint, these stereo speakers can be driven directly by the 15-watt 2-channel amplifier that's already present on the display driver board. But as we have introduced a subwoofer, we need a way of driving it as well. Adding an additional amplifier for this is easy enough, mine being a mono 30-watt unit just for the subwoofer, but getting a signal to it is a little bit tricky, as the only place to pull it from is from the already amplified stereo signal powering the main drivers, so it's going to require us to do a little bit of careful filtering. To do this safely, the amplified signal first needs to pass through a signal attenuation network to reduce its voltage range to line level. This is immediately followed by a pair of DC blocking capacitors to eliminate the DC voltage present on a Class D amp output, which can then feed into a 1-to-1 audio isolation transformer harvested from an inexpensive ground loop isolator to completely eliminate any potential for grounding hum. I've constructed 2 of these filter circuits, one for the left channel and one for the right channel, with them then being summed together into the subwoofer amplifier with a pair of 1 microfarad capacitors to act as a simple low-pass filter, ensuring that only the bass notes get through. While you might not class it as hi-fi, it's perfectly acceptable for this class of speaker drivers, delivering a nicely balanced, full-bodied soundstage despite the overall compactness of the build. To wrap up the entire enclosure and cleanly cover the electronics, I'm once again utilising a sheet of aluminium wrapped in matching vinyl to create a flat aesthetic. It might initially seem counterintuitive to seal the ventilation fans and the subwoofer behind a solid metal panel like this, but I've carefully spaced the backplate far enough away from these components to maintain an unrestricted path for airflow. This creates a beautifully thin modern profile without compromising the system's thermal performance. Now, speaking of thermal management, it's always critical to double check that the laptop fans don't have any open air gaps around their shrouds that would have originally been sealed off by the laptop's factory casing. If you spot any gaps where air could recirculate internally, they can easily be sealed up with a bit of high quality tape to ensure that the fan's static pressure is maintained. With that final detail sorted, the build is complete. Not only are we left with a breathtakingly sharp, wide gamut iMac Retina display, but the underlying system is incredibly performant, achieving a remarkable level of power and utility, especially considering it was made almost entirely from salvaged components. I was amazed at how well it handles heavy loads like video editing and even gaming. And as the laptop motherboard has a recent NVIDIA graphics card, it can take full advantage of AI-based upscaling, which means that it looks tack sharp on the 4K screen. It's absolutely wild given the total cost of the system, and really showcases how using old parts can give a lot back. I've not had this much fun building a PC for years, and I can highly recommend it.
Now, if you'd like a little bit more of an easy project, it's worth noting that it's very possible to simply make shells for them. I made this one for a salvaged laptop motherboard that I picked up online, and as it matches the new Steam machine in performance, it makes for a great little portable gaming box, only for a third of the price. I've installed all of the old classics that I used to enjoy playing with the intention to take it to friends' houses for some casual gaming, and it's a good value way of having some fun. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing how to take disused laptop motherboards and making something awesome with them. If you want to have a go at anything like this yourself, make sure you check out the forum thread that I've linked to down below, where you can find out all sorts of extra information as well as some helpful search terms to help you to find boards that are going to be perfect for your own builds. Now, something else that's cool is that DIY Perks is almost at 5 million subscribers. Now, I've got each and every one of you to thank for helping me get this far, and if you'd like to help me pass that 5 million subscriber milestone, please do press the subscribe button if you haven't already. I really do appreciate it. But other than that, I'm Matt, you've been watching DIY Perks, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye for now.